Well, so if you're new here, I just want to say thanks for coming. Welcome. We recognize that there are a lot of different things you can do on a Sunday morning, and it is an honor, a blessing to have you here and joining us. If you don't know, I am new. I've been here just a couple months, and we're trying some new things. This series that we're working on, we're just starting, brand new series today. We're calling When Love Came to Town. Now, that is a reference to a song that just came to my mind. So, yeah, a little When Love Came to Town. Now, I want to give you a little bit of context so we're working on using a little bit of new media. So we're trying to play videos and using more pictures and that kind of stuff. Even just having sermons with titles and series and, kind of stuff like that. Why do we do that? I just want to give that a little bit of context. So we live in because one thing you might begin to think is, well, maybe they're thinking, the Bible's boring, and so they're trying to, spoof it, kind of spiff it up a little bit or something like that. And I just have to say, no, that's not it at all. No. The whole idea is we recognize we live in a world where communication is getting very, very multi-layered, right? And that there's a way that anywhere else you go outside of church, you're getting communicated to in a whole lot of different ways. Lots of multimedia, lots of layers to it. And so we're experimenting, trying to figure out ways to communicate the truth of the gospel in a way that remains relevant, that remains fresh, and has some layers to it as well. Because if you talk to psychologists, different images, different sounds, different ways of communicating are the things that stick in us and begin to form us. So this picture of When Love Came to Town. See, it goes back to this song that goes something like this. Here's some lines from it. I was a sailor, I was lost at sea. I was under the waves before love rescued me. I was a fighter, I could turn on a thread. Now I stand accused of the things I've said. When love comes to town, I'm going to jump that train. When love comes to town, I'm going to catch that flame. Maybe I was wrong to ever let you down, but I did what I did before love came to town. And the song, if you read all the lyrics of the song, it really is about Jesus. It's about when Jesus came to town, I did what I did before love came to town. And we're going to be looking for the next 4 weeks at some stories of Jesus about love coming to town. So that's the image. I don't know that slide needs to be up there the whole time, but yeah, thanks. So anyway, that's the vision. That's kind of where we're going. And I just got to say, I know sometimes we're making this stuff up, and sometimes the images are going to really work. And you're going to go, oh, that was rich. I'm so thankful for that. And sometimes the images are going to be like, what? I don't get it. And we're just going to keep trying. Because we've learned, and what I'm convinced of, is that for us to continue to reach the next generation, we've got to figure out creative and new ways. And anytime you're creative, you can't have the standard of perfection. If you're going to be creative, you got to have freedom to try, and sometimes it'll land, and sometimes it won't, and that's what we got to do together. So that just to give you a little context. So we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. So if you have your Bible, break it out. This is a story I really love. This is a great, great story. They went across the lake to the region of Gerasenes. I'm probably saying that wrong. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. The man lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with chains. He had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart, broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. So here's the story. It starts off before Jesus even gets out of the boat. There is a man who is severely messed up, right? This is a guy who's got serious, serious problems. And from the story, we get this hint that he hasn't always been this way. It's been getting worse. You can see it in verse 3. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore. Right? So at one point, I just wondered, and Mark, the way that Mark tells stories is he leaves out huge, huge portions of details, right? He just gives you the bullets, little pieces that are really, really important, like words like anymore. So at some point, this guy had been bindable. So I could just imagine the people who were the strongest, boldest guys in town, when this guy, this young man, and mind you, these are small towns. These are communities that are they're rural, agricultural communities that everybody knows everybody, right? And everybody knows everybody's business, right? I mean, Ellensburg, huh? But actually probably on a scale that's even smaller, right? So everybody knows everybody's business. Everybody has watched this kid grow up and watched him twist, right? Watch him become more and more strange. Watch the kind of just creepy. I mean, Halloween was just yesterday, right? I didn't choose this scripture knowing Halloween. I didn't think that deep, but it's actually a great reference. You know, all those scary things that were coming. Okay, let's face it, a lot of them were cute and nice, but you know, the scary ones, like this kid became more and more of that kind of person, right? We don't know what kind of rituals or what kind of things happened to him to make him, but I imagine even the people who were binding him went away going, ugh, you know, I just want to take a shower after that. And then they get him bound, and maybe he would behave a little better. They'd let him loose, and then after a little while, he'd have another episode that was just too weird and too offensive and too creepy, and they'd want to chain him up again. But then he started to break the chains. I mean, you know, in some ways we think about breaking chains as freedom, liberation, right? But this is not breaking chains of liberation. This is breaking chains of the bondage inside of him is so intense, right? He lives, well, who are his friends? Where does he hang out? Among dead people, right? I mean, he's living the I see dead people life, right? He's out in the tombs night and day. He cuts himself and he cries out. I mean, this is a picture of a person who's living hell, right? He's got his foretaste of where his life is headed, and it is bad. It is awful. It is very dark. And everyone in the community is aware of it, right? There's just no avoiding it. I mean, I could imagine parents telling their kids stories. Oh, don't go out there. You better be good or I'm going to let, you know, that kind of thing. Like this is a very, very frightening, very scary thing for the people in the community. It is Halloween on steroids. Now, I just have to pause for a second. I recognize, even in a group this size, we're not all necessarily coming to the story with the same set of assumptions, right? For some of us, just the very idea of a spirit world, the very idea of demons or somebody in this condition, you know, there are a variety of ways you could read it. It's possible you say, well, maybe this is just sort of an ancient way of understanding mental illness. Okay, and I want to be careful as I say, I don't want to be so... parochial to say, you have to see it my way, right? You have to see it the traditional Christian way. I'm not going to say that, and I just want to say, you're welcome here to see it a little different. At the same time, I want to tell you about the way that the Christian understanding of the spirit world has been, there is space for the demonic. That there is actually evil and good in the world, and that there is a space for that. And that not all mental illness is just a chemical imbalance. Now, recognize that there is chemical imbalance, that there is mental illness is a very real thing. But as a Christian, I also recognize that there is a darkness in the world, a personified darkness even, that interplays with mental illness. So that it's very difficult to just say it's just one thing, right? And in this story, they're making it very clear, no, there's something else going on here. This isn't just the guy's got intellectual problems. There is a profound spiritual... The words, it's interesting, they don't even actually say, when they describe him, as a demon. Looking at the Greek, you'll see it's an impure spirit. And I think the way... I actually kind of like that language, an impure spirit, because you know you've been around one when you just feel it, and it's yucky. Right? It's bad. And I'm betting what's interesting is we don't necessarily go around talking about these things, but most people have had an experience with darkness that you go, ugh, there was something not right there. And not in a fun sort of way, but in a ugh sort of way. Right? We had a friend, actually a housemate, that lived with us for a while, and she went and saw. Do you guys remember the Blair Witch Project? I know this kind of dates me. Late 90s. It was this indie film made on a shoestring budget where they took video cameras out into the woods, and I think in Massachusetts, and it was very. Well, I didn't see it. I just saw the commercials. I don't like to be scared. I don't like that kind of stuff. But our housemate went and saw it, and she said, she's like, it's really fascinating. I think she's a little regretful for having seen it, but she said, it's really fascinating. When you're watching the movie, the first response to evil was this sort of sense of curiosity and intrigue. She's like, you're sort of like drawn in. Come, I'm curious, what's going on there? But she said, then there comes this point where you just like, and you just want to run away. It's just gross. It's just scary. And that's what this guy is like, right? There's this huge darkness and ick about him, this impurity and this drive. So now Jesus, we'll back up the tape a little bit for his day. He started off the day in a boat teaching a whole bunch of people. And he taught and he taught and he taught. I mean, he delivered it. I mean, he delivered it, right? So he delivers this message, and then the passage goes, just as he is, he stays. So in other words, he stays in the boat, and they take off across the sea. Meanwhile, he falls asleep, zonked. Storm comes. The disciples think they're going to die. They wake Jesus up. He calms the storm. So the last thing he just did is he just calmed the storm, right? So he's now arriving, and as he's getting out of the boat, guess who's arriving? Right? This guy is showing up. Now, I don't know about you. Have you ever showed up at work and had problems hitting you before you even get out of the car? You're getting out of the car, and somebody's rushing out into the parking lot saying, blah, 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 or maybe it's your phone ringing. I mean, this is Jesus, right? So he's just getting out of the boat, and this wild, crazy thing is coming up to him. So verse 6. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? And then in God's name, don't torment me. Don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." When Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Now, I just have to say, there's a lot of this story, even looking directly at what Mark has written, that I don't understand, right? Because there's some interesting language here. Jesus is coming, and it says, verse 8 is confusing me. For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." So prior, Jesus had said, so I don't understand if Jesus is getting out of the boat, sees the thing coming, is already saying, "Come out of this man." So okay, Jesus, you've commanded this spirit to come out, but then the guy falls forward, falls on his feet and says, "Jesus, you're the Son of the Most High God," and is shouting and making this big scene. So I don't get that exactly. But when it comes to Scripture, when you come to a story and you're like, I don't get all the pieces, my encouragement to you is to focus on the parts that are clear. And here's the part that's really, really clear to me from this. You've got this man who is possessed with all sorts of darkness. So much so they call him Legion. So Legion was a Roman troop that had between 1,000 and 5,000 soldiers. So at the very least, what he's saying is there's a whole lot of us in here. So let's just go conservative. It's 1 versus 1,000, right? Jesus versus 1,000. And as the 1,000 come and confront him, what do you see? What's really, really fascinating is there's no struggle at all, right? Jesus versus the enemy comes forward, and it's actually not even like that. See, because there's this idea out there sometimes that we can kind of think that the universe is sort of a battle of good versus evil, right? It's this, it's like a superhero, a Marvel comic kind of thing, right? Where you see this, and those are really fun. Those are fun movies to watch and fun dramas, but that's not this drama, right? It's not Jesus versus Satan. And then there's a guy, and then we all start believing, and Jesus starts doing well, and then everybody starts doubting, and Jesus starts struggling. No, it's not like that at all. The disciples have just had their socks blown off by the whole getting across the sea. They come up, and here's this guy coming, and it's very, very clear. The demons are very, very aware. You are the one in control. Now, I think they're trying to do this judo move on Jesus. I don't know this for sure. But I think they're trying to create a big bunch of attention. You're the Son of the Most High God. You can destroy us. And they're just trying to create this big craziness around Jesus. And Jesus is just not going to have any of it. That's not what it's about. So he gives permission for the demons to go out into the pigs. Now, once you know how I was saying there are things I don't understand. I don't understand. Jesus, what you got against pigs? Right? I mean, I don't get that, right? I don't get it. Like, what do the demons mean when they say, don't send us out of the area? Jesus, why wouldn't you want to send them out of the area? Why? What? I don't know. What I do know is we can see from the very moment Jesus is leaving the boat that he is in absolute control. There is no hint of, whoa, it was a close one there. Not a drop of that. Absolutely. This guy, in his very worst, twisted and broken setting, comes and Jesus has absolute authority to say, I'll tell you when and where you need to go. Right? That's authority. Right? This is not, this is not the kind of control. I mean, I don't have this kind of authority over anybody. I have this kind of authority over myself sometimes, but I certainly don't have it over my wife or my kids or employees or nothing. There's no one where I say where and when, you go where and when. Jesus is like, this is the way it's going to be. Mind you, this is a man no one could even control. They could not control him at all. But Jesus shows on the scene when and where, baby. Okay, you can go. And then just imagine, this had to have been such a scene. And I could, if I was a movie maker, if I was a producer, this would be so fun, right? Because it's just this whoosh out of the man, and then 2,000 pigs. That is a lot of pork, right? I mean, that is just an incredible amount. And imagine the demons hit the pigs, and this just gives you a sense of impurity, right? Even the pigs, even the impure animal from a Jewish perspective, right, is like, oh no, we're not having any of this. This is crazy. They rush down into the sea and die. Now, this is just begging a bunch of bad puns, right? Bay of pigs, deviled ham. Anyway, okay, sorry. You got to make a little jokes here every now and then, I'm sure the pig market went belly up after that, and anyways, yeah, yes. So, did I read that part? Verse 11. A large herd of pigs was feeding on a nearby hillside, and the demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. And he gave them permission. The impure spirits came out and went into the pigs, and the herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off. No duh, right? They'd just be freaked out. Ran off and reported this in the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. And when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons, sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. And then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave the region. This is a part of the story that's kind of sad to me and frankly a little confusing. But imagine somebody who comes to town. Let's think about this in terms of Ellensburg context, right? Imagine Jesus comes to town and the first thing that he does is sets all the hay fields on fire and wipes out the hay industry for a year. That would be kind of a bummer, right? That would be hard for us. That would hurt our economy. Or Jesus comes to town and suddenly the state no longer funds the university and the university has to shut down for a year, right? That would be really painful for us, right? So I kind of get that. Jesus comes to town and they see this herd of pigs wiped out, right? And that had to hurt. But they come and they see this man who had been twisted and tormented as long as they'd known him. And they'd watched him become more and more just deranged. They come and the first thing they see are the pigs and the man. And their response is fear. Whoa. This is a big deal. I think it's bigger than the economic impact. I think they're looking and saying, you are a spiritual authority that we have seen nothing like. And frankly, that scares us. It's an interesting response. You, Jesus, because you don't hear a lot of stories about Jesus, the scary one, right? But this kind of power freaks them out. They are aware that you have something that is completely out of our control. We don't get to dictate how this is going to work. Would you please leave? Would you please leave? Just leave. Just leave. Wow, what a fascinating, interesting response. And I wonder if for us sometimes there's a way that the notion of coming to God and allowing someone who has this much authority, who has this much power, we might be able to relate to this just a little bit. Now, the story goes on. Jesus was getting into the boat. So here's the interesting thing. Jesus, it doesn't sound like he's offended. Doesn't sound like he's mad. He's not going, you can't treat me like that. No, Jesus is like, okay, getting back into the boat. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. This is interesting. This man has experienced incredible deliverance, right? He is a new man. He is in his right mind. He's clothed. He's whole. And he's looking at Jesus. Jesus, I want to go with you. And once again, I think this is a little bit of a twist in the story, a little bit of a surprise. Like, Jesus' response is, no, stay. Now, there's another dimension to the story that you might not have put together. And one is, they're farming pigs. That's a big hint of what kind of people where Jesus has arrived. Jews don't do pigs. There'd be no market for pigs, right? This is Gentile territory. This man is not Jewish. And so he's big. He wants to be with Jesus. All he wants is Jesus. But Jesus understands it's going to be a problem if he takes this Gentile man with him throughout as he travels around Judea and Galilee. Like, that's just not going to work. And then you've got this man who his experience, he has a story to tell. So Jesus is very clear with him. He says this. Jesus did not let him go, but said, go home to your own people, and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. So Jesus empowers this guy. Look, you have experienced deliverance. You are free. Now go and tell your story. The Decapolis are 10 cities, 10 Gentile cities, 10 cities that this guy's got the pass into. They're his people. He can go and tell his story. And I can guarantee you, anybody as twisted and as scary as he was, his story is going to be known. Those 2,000 pigs that all died, that story is going to be told. It's like out in Twitter, right? I mean, Twitter's happening just today with that sort of instant communication, but it's amazing in the old days how fast gossip spread, right? How fast a story that was so salacious as that. I mean, the kind of impact. I mean, everybody knows about this. And this man is free to go and tell his story, to go and share what God has done. That's a good story. Now, it's interesting, one of the things that happens sometimes is when somebody comes to Christ, when they come to faith, is they often, what we want to do is hold them in the church so much, because you don't want to get them back out there because they're going to stumble and fall and get back into their bad life. We hold them in the church until all their old friends have gone away and they don't have a chance to really, the story of what God has done for them sometimes gets muted. Sometimes that happens to us, right? We get so caught in staying inside the building, hanging out in our holy huddle, where we're kind of running along with all our Christian friends, that we aren't really free to go and tell our story, to go and tell what God has done for us. Now, this week, my son and I were going to a swim meet. We were driving a car, and he wanted me to listen to this TED Talk. And so we were listening to it until our data ran out. And so, but anyways, this guy was talking about wolves in the Yellowstone. Thank you. Oh, man, wolves in Yellowstone, right? And how for 70 years there were no wolves in Yellowstone, right? And so in the the mid 90s, wolves were reintroduced, and the impact that wolves had on the ecosystem of Yellowstone is very, very profound. So for instance, up until then, for those 70 years, the deer population had gone wild. I mean, it had just exploded, so much so that the vegetation was incredibly overgrazed, right? Yellowstone was suffering. It was part of why they chose to reintroduce wolves, because they're having a terrible time controlling the deer population. So of course, like they had expected, some deers died. I mean, wolves had to be fed. But what interesting thing happened was deers, they wouldn't go into certain parts of the park anymore because they knew that was a place that was very easy to get trapped and killed, right? So they began to learn. So the deer migration began to shift. And in those places that the deer weren't at, the vegetation began to grow. Trees quadrupled in size. And then as the trees and the vegetation began to grow, other species began to thrive, like the beavers, right? The beavers need the trees. So beavers are knocking out, and beavers are another one of these species that begin to create habitat for other species, right? So now the wolves are here that are controlling the deer population, that are allowing the beavers to knock down trees and allowing these bushes to grow up and not just get eaten. So the bears are even thriving because they're eating the berries. Now the wolves are also attacking the coyote population. So the coyote population is going down. So now the rabbits are starting to thrive and the foxes are starting to thrive. Even birds of prey there's more food because the coyotes aren't running, they're not overpopulated. So much so that the whole ecosystem of Yellowstone has been impacted by this, what they call a keystone species. This species that is now even to the point where the flow of the rivers is being changed because of the way that the vegetation is being impacted by the controlling of the deers and all the other ecosystems. It's this giant web being impacted, right? You tracking with me? So as I was listening, I was totally gripped by that. How one species, even one that you think, we don't need this one, it just eats. That's all it does. This one species makes an impact on the whole system, makes the whole thing thrive. And as I'm driving along, I'm thinking about, are there gifts in the body of Christ that are like that? Right there, all the gifts are equal. You could, if you want to be all animal, all the animals are great. We love all the animals. Yeah. Well, no, I'm not saying wolves are better. And if you're a rancher, I recognize that's a hot topic, and I'm not trying to go there. I'm just telling you what they discovered in Yellowstone, right? That there are some things that have huge reaching impacts. So I was thinking about gifts in the body of Christ. And there are two of them that really stand out to me. And one of them is the gift of evangelism. The willingness to go out and share your faith with other people. To talk to people about Jesus. That will have an impact on us. And I have been a part of, and honestly, I got to feel like I'm a little bit of a part of it. I've arrived back again. And I mean absolutely no judgment, but I feel like we're a little bit like Yellowstone after 70 years without wolves. Right? We need evangelists to be reintroduced among us. Those of you who are evangelists need fire, need fuel poured on that fire. There's something powerful and beautiful that begins to happen in a body of believers that begins to see new believers show up. Right? You get in a Bible study with somebody who doesn't believe or is brand new to belief, brand new to God, and you will see things you have never seen. There is a freshness and a life. When you are sharing your faith and you get beat down, and you're like, oh man, they hate me at work, man. I can't even, they give me names, Bible thumper, all that kind of stuff. You show up at worship on Sunday morning and you need to hear from God. You need worship to be alive, and you show up ready to go because you need it, right? And as the gifts began to work with each other, the other gift that I would say, I think prayer is another one of those. And they so work hand in hand. It's that when you start to care about the lost in our community, when you start thinking, well, I liked the sermon, it was okay, it wasn't okay. When you go from that sort of critiquing, Tracy's worship, she could do a better job picking songs, or, I don't like that slide, that picture was so dumb, or that's so worldly, or whatever. When you go from that to, God, my friends need you. When you start to have that burning in you, your whole faith experience, the whole experience of the community comes alive. And that is the invitation. And what I love about this story is this is a story of a man who's getting delivered who is so far out, right? And I don't know about you, but I have people in my world that I go, don't even try. There's no way that they're interested at all. I mean, that happened to me just this week. Someone I know and love a lot. And I had an opportunity to pray with her and I didn't. What was I thinking? I had nothing to lose other than I just didn't believe God was going to do anything. And I'm a pastor, for goodness sake, this is my job. And all I can do is look out at you and say, I've got to believe that for us, there are people in our world that what we need to believe is this same Jesus who shows up on the boat and isn't threatened at all, shows up off the boat and isn't threatened at all, who looks around and as this wildness is happening around him, he is still at work. And we are his body. We are his representatives. He wants to deliver today. Whether they're crazy far out, pierced and twisted and just, living all sorts of crazy lifestyle that just makes you go, ugh, right? Jesus is like, I'm interested in her. I'm interested in him. Or whether it's somebody that you go, oh, I think they know. They live a pretty good life. Jesus is like, they can have so much more. We just start to assume everybody's basically got the same sort of level of goodness that I have in my life. No, they don't. No, they don't. You have no idea. We have no idea how much people numb themselves, how much people chase after stuff just to feel okay. All around, people in your cubicle, people who work beside you, folks who are in class with you. Folks need Jesus. And the first call for us is to soften our hearts and say, God, give us your heart for those who don't know you. This is not, the last thing I want to say is feel guilty about all the ways you haven't, no. What I would say, we do need to lower, I'm afraid of what other people think of me. We need that part, that's pride actually. So I'm not afraid to say, look, I need to let that one go. I need to just go, you know what? Okay, sure, I'm weird, right? I'm a pastor, for goodness sake. Of course I'm weird, right? But it's like, no, we all just need to let that go a little bit. We need to be a little less concerned about what the neighbors think of us, what your cubicle mate thinks of you, right? On the other hand, we also need to recognize it's not our job to save. Our job is simply to be honest, to tell the story of what God has done for us. Another way to think about it, for those of us who opening our mouth is really, really, really scary, I'm not trying to let you off, but I would just say, I think in today's busy, busy culture, one of the best ways to be evangelistic is hospitality. Hey, do you want to come over? Can I take you out to lunch? Hey, you want to come over for dinner? Hey, we're throwing a party. Hey, do you want to connect with my life? People are so busy, that invitation is very, very powerful. That is a whole different way of thinking. Come and connect with my life. Invest is another way to think about it. Invest, get interested in their life, and invite them to come to church. We're going to work hard. We're going to continue to work hard to make this a place where somebody who doesn't know Jesus can come and not be freaked out. Right? That's what we're working on. That's why we're going to show images that are like, oh, isn't that an album cover? Yeah. Because when love comes to town, everything changes. I'm going to jump that train. When love comes to town, I want to be there. I did what I did before love came to town, right? We want to see our friends taste that love. We want to be a body that is aflame with it, that has evangelism reintroduced, so that we are a healthy ecosystem. We're a healthy place where we've got folks who look a little different than us and think a little different than us, but they are in that light shining down and enjoying and stretching us and reminding us that God is a big God who is about transforming people. Let me pray for us and we'll wrap it up with a worship song. Jesus, you are so good. You are powerful. I pray that you would be tapping on our shoulders and getting us out of our comfort zones as we go home, as we go to work, as we interact with our neighbors and our friends. God, I pray that you would protect us from guilt and shame, that you would silence the enemy that tears us down and makes us want to hide more, but that there would be a freedom and a hope and a willingness to take risks in telling people about how great you are.